Hello, I'm W.P. Edmondson and welcome to Focus. Freedom often causes unbelievable silence. Well, as you know, our purpose is, of course, to inform, educate, and motivate citizens to action. We have with us the Reverend Martin Rafanan, and he is an organizer with Jobs for Justice. And of course, he will elaborate on what Job for Justice is and so forth in a little bit. We are happy to have him at JCTV Focus table. Welcome to Focus.
Thank you very much.
Okay. First of all, before we get into it, tell us a little bit about who you are.
Martin Rafanan. My parents were immigrants to this country. My father came from the Philippines in 1927. My mother actually was a Holocaust survivor, came to this country in the late 40s. They made their home in Oakland, California. And so I grew up there, went to the University of California, and then later on studied for the ministry in St. Louis at Concordia Seminary. Graduated in '78, had a parish ministry till '94 in St. Louis, and then worked for the National Conference for Community and Justice, which was founded as the National Conference of Christians and Jews. I was the director there for 12 years in eastern Missouri and southern Illinois, and our work was to fight bias, bigotry, and racism, and promote understanding and respect among all cultures and religions through conflict resolution, advocacy, and education. After that, I served as the director of the state's largest emergency shelter for women, children, and families, Gateway 180, Homelessness Reversed. And in the last year and a half, I have been organizing community support for fast food workers and their demand for a $15 wage and the right to form a union without retaliation.
Okay. Wikipedia has this caption, and I quote, "Faith in action," in referring to Job for Justice. What is Jobs for Justice, and is it a faith-based organization?
Jobs with Justice, it's it's a national, okay. It's a national organization with expressions locally. For example, there is a statewide Jobs with Justice. It's called Missouri Jobs with Justice, with a lot of leaders in St. Louis, in Kansas City, and in other parts of the state. It is a very progressive organization that fights for working families and to create economic justice for all in our community. And we do that by building a coalition of organizations that come together to learn more about what it takes to strengthen working families across Missouri and to fight for those families. We bring together, as I said, over 100 organizations across the state of Missouri. We have a very large base of close to 30,000 individuals who support our work across the state, and we are very active in issues that relate to working families. We also promote very inclusive ways for communities to be involved. For example, I am a co-chair of what we call a Workers' Rights Board, which is grassroots leaders, opinion leaders in communities that come together from the faith, the labor, the community, and the academic communities or sectors. These leaders come together to be a moral voice, a public moral voice on behalf of working families, to address discrimination in the workplace, to work on economic justice issues for working families, and to generally be a voice, a stronger voice in communities so that working families can pursue what they need to be stronger and to build our communities across the state.
I see where Jobs with Justice was founded in 1987. What was going on in the country during that time that resulted in the establishment of such an organization?
Well, actually, it's a little bit earlier. Is when the actual public structures of our country started to really work against unions, against organizing and collective bargaining. It started with Reagan, really, with you know, the air controllers,
Right.
when that whole process was broken, and that union was broken, and from that point on, there was a consistent, or has been a consistent, attack on organizing and collective bargaining in our nation. The union density has decreased in that time frame very substantially, so that now across the nation, union density really is under 7%. That is, 7% of really Americans in jobs have or are represented in a union. So Jobs with Justice is an organization that kind of grew out of a response by the community to this level of attack on unions, on organizing and collective bargaining. We wanted to be locally available to support workers and their activities, support their ability to create unions, and support their ability to organize and collectively bargain within unions. Mm-hmm. So that we are a group of community folks who stand with workers as they seek to strengthen their voice. And what a union is really is the voice of workers in our economy. It's the ability of workers to speak strongly on their own behalf, to increase their wages, to improve their benefits, to make for a more respectful workplace, a safer workplace. It's their opportunity to engage the process of making our economy in this country more equal. Right now, we know that there's a tremendous disparity between those at the very top of our economy and those that are at the bottom. Well, labor unions have been a voice for workers to create greater equity and to build an opportunity for folks to really access resources in the community that allow them to take care of themselves, their families, and their communities. And that's what we want to promote. We want to give workers a stronger voice. Right now, that voice is very weak. The wealth of our country is moving to capital. It's moving to the richest in our land, and we want to turn that around a little bit. The voice of workers has to grow, and they need to develop an opportunity so that more of the resources of our community can be shared with a broader and more inclusive group of people in our communities.
What are your response to the corporate sector that says that you are attacking success? You are attacking what they call the job makers.
Well, you know, we very much believe in the success of corporate America. We think that businesses should have the opportunity to grow and be successful. We just don't think that they should take all of the resources of our community. As an example, I have been working to build support for fast food workers. And a fast food worker makes very much the minimum wage for the most part, or slightly above the minimum wage. For example, in St. Louis, they average about $8.50 an hour. Now, I started my first minimum wage job in 1969 as a stock clerk, and I made $1.35 an hour. Well, if you just adjusted that wage for inflation, today that $1.35 would equal $10.71. So actually the minimum wage has been decreasing over the last 3 decades by almost 30%. And a minimum wage doesn't really support a person in their lives. $8 an hour, I can assure you, will not cover the basic needs of your life if you have to buy your food, your housing, a little bit of health care, perhaps a little bit of child care. We know that in St. Louis, if you're an adult with a child and you want to live without government assistance, that number is $46,000. You would need 3 of these fast food jobs at $8 an hour to truly be close to covering the living wage that is required by most people. So these workers are saying that a company that's making $14 billion in $7 billion in profit and spends an additional $7 billion buying back stock or giving it to their shareholders, we would say that they are making an excellent profit. It hasn't stopped them from increasing the wage of their CEO by 15% a year. So we want to ask the question to McDonald's, why won't you raise the wage of the people who are working on the front line of your company, the people who make your company successful? You have not increased their wage at all over the last decade. And so this is the question that we want to ask. Now, McDonald's will tell their workers to apply for government assistance. They will tell their workers, because they know their workers can't survive on $8 an hour or working 24 hours a week, so they have to make sure that those workers can survive. So what do? They tell them to apply for government assistance, get food stamps, get onto a health care program paid for by the government, make sure that you get an earned income tax credit. So McDonald's and their workers, they take in $7 billion in federal assistance. The workers at McDonald's in the United States. So who ends up paying for these workers as they try to survive? It's you and me through our tax dollars. Why is it that McDonald's, making $14 billion in profit, is making us pay for the survival of their workers and subsidize their pay? That's the question fast food workers are asking. Because if they had that money from McDonald's, where would it be spent, WT?
Yeah.
If you had McDonald's worker right here and they made $2 more an hour, where would they be spending that money?
Locally.
They would be spending it right here in the Jefferson City economy, where it needs to stay, instead of being taken by this company and invested in their, or put away in their account in Switzerland, or offshore, or giving it back to their already rich shareholders. We are asking McDonald's to be a good company, to take care of their workers and to take care of our community. They're not doing that right now. And we need to make sure that they do. And it's not just McDonald's, it's Target, it's Walmart, it's a lot of companies that are making a lot of money and they are not investing in our communities.
What have been the majority of the CEO's response to such an argument?
Their response, I mean, you're asking someone who thinks their response is quite weak. They say that they are making opportunities for people. And I would say that not only are they making opportunities for people to work, they are taking advantage of them as they do work. So McDonald's has no problem paying $15 an hour in Australia because they're required to pay $15 an hour in Australia. They don't have any problem paying $22 an hour in Japan because that is what they are required to pay in Japan. And they don't mind paying $22 in Europe because that is what they are required to pay. Because in every one of these places, you know, there are either in-place policy structures which require companies to pay a living wage, or there are unions which move the company to pay a wage that is more commensurate with the productivity of workers. McDonald's will also say that, well, this is a job that really is a starting job and someone should do this and learn how to do, be employed and so forth. But I guarantee you, if you wanted to find out what a McDonald's job is all about, why don't you try and take one and find out how easy it is. This is a job that requires a lot of attention to detail, a job that requires people to deal with the public effectively, et cetera, et cetera. So in many industries in the United States, people started out by saying, well, those are an industry where we don't need to pay a fair wage. If you're a miner, you're going down underground, we're not paying you fairly. Well, miners decided that no, that's not right. You need to pay us a fair wage, and they organized themselves to make sure that that job would pay a fair wage. truckers, warehouse people, many industries, the automotive industry, that was considered a nothing job when it was started. And yet these industries created what were some of the best jobs for working people when workers organized, collectively bargained, and moved forward with their lives. And that's what fast food workers are doing now. It's just their time. These are workers that are asking for what they believe to be a fair wage. It is a fair wage, and McDonald's should pay it. The fast food industry should pay it. And in the other places where large, very wealthy corporations are taking advantage of workers, like Walmart, Target, and other places, they need to pay a fair wage. So, but workers are going to ask for that to happen. Workers are going to fight for that to happen. And where I stand as a minister of the gospel is that I want to be on their side. I want to stand with them and help to protect them when they do fight for what is right, because the company can fire them in a second.
Right.
They have no protection. So unless clergy stand with some of these workers and bring them back to work after they've been on a legal strike for 24 hours, then they can be just retaliated against without mercy, literally. And thankfully, Jobs with Justice, that has this group called the Workers' Rights Board, we can organize ourselves to stand with these workers, to bring them back to their jobs, to help them stay focused on what they're doing in their organizing, and to tell management, do not retaliate against this worker in any way. We're watching this, and we will be back to make sure that you take care of this worker. They are actually just executing their legal right to try to form a union and to ask for what they need on the job. This is their right as an American citizen. This isn't anything that's outside of the bounds of what is their right. So many of the workers now say, this is the new civil rights movement. You know, before, look, Dr. King could talk about race, he could talk about class, but when he started saying we need to be out of the war in Vietnam and we need to pay a living wage, a fair wage to people in our communities, when he went to stand with sanitation workers in Memphis, that's when he had to be shot. Mm-hmm. All right, because he was going too far. Mm-hmm. Now, these fast food workers, they have really been out there. They have been putting it on the line, putting their lives on the line for the last year and a half, 2 years. And they've been just saying to the community, we need to pay attention to this, folks, because if this keeps happening, then you'll have Ferguson over and over again, because people won't have the resources necessary to take care of themselves, their families, and their community. And the end result of that is violence. And that needs to be stopped.
What is government, state and federal governments throughout the country, what are these states saying about increasing minimum wage? What is the federal government saying about increasing minimum wage to a living wage?
Of course, the president has been asking for an increase in the minimum wage to above $10. And he, by executive order, has made this a reality for many workers in the federal government. There are many communities across the nation that have decided that they're going to raise the minimum wage themselves, and they have. Seattle has raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour. The San Francisco is considering the same thing, and there are other communities that are doing this. We in Missouri are also considering some of these possible activities locally, that our local governments might increase minimum wage to address the needs of workers. For example, in St. Louis, we do know how much it does cost for a person to live in our community, and live in our community without using or accessing government resources. And so we are saying, well, that should be our minimum wage. And now people, of course, companies in corporate America will say, well, you're going to be destroying small businesses. You're going to be destroying mid-sized businesses. Well, that's just a plain lie, because actually 90% of minimum wage jobs are in major corporations. 90% of these jobs, small businesses, medium-sized businesses, they actually pay more attention to paying their workers fairly. So of course corporations are going to say that this will destroy job growth, will destroy productivity, etc. Why? Because they are protecting their profits. Now, and I don't, all I'm saying is look at the numbers, because it's clear that McDonald's is a very successful company. They're a very successful company all over the world, and it is possible that they could raise their prices. But if you paid 25 cents more for your number two when you went to a McDonald's, if everybody, every time they went to a McDonald's, paid 25 cents more per purchase, that would pay for a living wage and health care benefits for all of their workers. Now, I, for one, I'm happy to pay another quarter.
Yeah.
But you could have a combination. You could raise a little bit of cost in this corporation, and the corporation could say, well, we're just not going to make a $7 billion profit this year. We're going to make a $6 billion profit and share some of that with our workers. But that is what that will not come without a fight. And workers understand this. That's why they say our demand is for $15 and a union. It's not just $15. $15 just is a number. You need the ability to hold on to $15 an hour, and that's what a union is for.
As you indicated earlier during your discussion here, that unions have decreased in a number as well as their power base. What do you say about a new union, fast food workers being able to unionize? There's a battle to destroy unions. So if this union is in fact established, aren't they going to go after that union as well to seek to destroy it?
It's a very interesting question, WT, because actually the entire corporation, McDonald's Corporation, is structured to avoid being unionized. That's why they have a franchise. That way they can say, well, if you want to unionize, you can unionize every one of our thousands upon thousands upon thousands of franchises, which of course is impossible. They also allow those franchises to steal wages.
How do they go about doing that?
By making their workers work off the clock. In other words, we need you to clock out now, but before you go home, you need to take the garbage out. They do this across the nation, and we have documented it in over 175 legal cases that we have brought to the National Labor Relations Board. Just 2 weeks ago, a major victory was achieved by fast food workers when the National Labor Relations Board brought down a judgment and said that the corporation, McDonald's, the corporation, not the franchise, but both the franchise and the corporation can and should be considered co-employers of a fast food worker. Now, that is a huge judgment because it means that the corporation must take on liability for what their franchise is doing. And as I said before, we have proof that franchises are taking advantage of their workers.
Sounds like a lot of work, and organized work costs money. There has to be a structure in place to make this stuff happen. What is the organization's funding source, and how does the organization go about accomplishing this mission without alienating the power base, to the point where you're not being supported?
That's a very good question. And let me just talk about Jaws with Justice, because I'm very proud of this organization, and your point is to the point. We do not accept a penny from anybody other than our base. All right? The people who share our values and share our self-interest. We believe as an organization that we must pay for our own movement. We do not take money from anyone else that does not share our values and our self-interest. We are one of the best funded progressive organizations in the United States. Here in Missouri, we have, and because I'm on the leadership team in Missouri and know this organization, and as you know, I was an executive director of many organizations in the social service sector and beyond, and so I know these were large organizations, and I know what it means to run a strong, transparent, well-organized, well-accounted for organization. This organization is funded by its own base, and we have money in reserve so that we are prepared to move on activities that we think are important, that our organization and our base feel is important. But we believe that we must fund. Now, we're not going to take any money from any corporate interest. We're not taking any money from any political interest. We believe we must maintain a level of independence. We must maintain that independence with our own dollars. So I'm a minister. I have worked in the social service area and as a director, and so I've been fortunate enough to be a person who has some level of means in the community. But I give $300 a month to this organization because they don't waste a penny of my money or a second of my time.
Yeah.
All right? And so I am in this supporting an organization where I know how the money is spent. Now, here's the reason I know that this is an inclusive decision-making organization. Jaws with Justice has many decision-making organizations and groups within the organization as a whole, for example, in Missouri. So there's a leadership team in St. Louis. There's a leadership team in St. Louis. There's a statewide executive board. On both sides of the state, we have organizing committees and we have workers' rights boards. Each of these groups is inclusive. Each of these, we watch this very carefully, where it must be inclusive relative to race, class, sex, gender, orientation, ability. We believe in an inclusive group of people coming together to make decisions about how the organization is going to act. And when we are agreed and when we have consensus, we move, we act, and we are successful because we build relationships, we get people into action, and then we tell them in advance what a win looks like and how we did.
Okay.
All right?
We're about to wrap it up. Could you tell us what are some of the basic strategies that JWJ, Jaws for Justice, utilize that you can share with local organizations who seek to collaborate to make things happen?
Critically important. I said before that one of the greatest things about Jaws for Justice is we build relationships. We want those relationships to be strong public relationships that are intentional. We want them to be accountable. We want them to be transparent. We want them to be long-term. We don't believe in one fight. We believe that there are lots of fights that are going to be ahead of us. So for example, we want to know the key leaders in a community so that when something happens, well, first of all, we want to build coalition. So the first thing that I've talked about building these strong public relationships. Well, the reason for this is to bring organizations together in coalition. That is probably the greatest gift of our organization, is that we know how to build a coalition, we know how to keep it together, and we know how to work, especially with people who are different in terms of their strategy, tactics, and perhaps even around some of their issues. We know that we don't have to agree on everything, but that when it comes time for us to come together around something, we need to find a way to do that, even though we are different in the way we do our business. So for example, in Ferguson, one of the reasons that there is chaos right now on the ground is that folks didn't talk with each other in advance. They didn't build a coalition that could powerfully address what has happened in the community. We believe that that has to happen on an ongoing basis, and if you don't have a coalition together before the crisis hits, you're not going to create it while the crisis is on. That coalition has to be built in advance. People need to talk to each other. They need to build, now in Ferguson, people are saying, we need to talk to each other. Well, it's it's too late. You need to do that before.
Yeah, okay.
We need to do it in Ferguson. We need to do it even more in other places. And I'm not just talking about Ferguson, I'm talking about our whole, talking about all of our communities. But that coalition building is powerful, and it needs to happen in advance of these crises happening. And so we bring that to the table across Missouri.
Okay, thank you very much. We have been speaking with Reverend Martin Rafanan, and he is an organizer with a St. Louis-based Jobs for Justice organization, and they are primarily organizers of workers. We'll be right back because now the Reverend spoke about what's going on in Ferguson, Missouri. We're coming back for another show. We'll be right back.